I'm Danica Lohr, and this is Lit Happens, your celebration of the literary arts here in Saskatchewan. Today I'm very pleased to welcome Miriam Körner. Miriam comes to us from La Ronge, where she has been living for 13 years. She has shared her stories in many magazine articles and has just published a novel and collaborated on a picture book, both rooted in northern Saskatchewan. Miriam, thank you for coming to Lit Happens this morning.
Well, thank you for having me.
I'm delighted to see your two new books. They're both beautiful, and they're set in a place that I know is very close to your heart, northern Saskatchewan. So can you just give me a little bit of an idea of what set you on this course to be a writer?
I guess it started in kindergarten, if I go back that far. And I started just copying picture books. But then people said, well, that's not a real job. You have to find something real. And it took quite a few years, actually, maybe until I turned 30, before I realized there's actually people that are writers. And living in northern Saskatchewan and being in places that very few people ever get to visit and hearing stories that few people ever get to experience, people kept saying to me, you have to write a book about this, you have to write a book about this. And I wasn't quite ready to write a book, but I did start writing for magazine articles and start sharing some of my adventure stories and some of the stories of the people I would meet in northern Saskatchewan.
And so you started with the true stories, the nonfiction, and those were very well received in the magazines all over Canada and around the world. And what led you to veer off into fiction and wanting to write a novel?
Well, when I was writing nonfiction stories, they usually were tied to a big adventure we would go on. We would go on a dog sledding expedition or a canoe expedition. But often during this trip or just living in my community, I would meet people and I would just get snippets of stories that I never wrote down or I just listened to in kind of in a more informal setting. And especially the elders, when they would see a dog team, they would come and they look at our dogs and they say, fine looking dog team you got. I used to have dogs, you know, and then they would start telling their stories about what their life was like with living with dogs, and that's something I always wanted to know more about because I'm really fascinated with sled dogs, and picture this area of a time where dogs were the only transportation in the north and people lived with their dogs, depended on them, was always fascinating to me, but I couldn't experience that anymore, only through stories. So I had all these snippets of stories, and eventually I thought, when one of those elders told me those stories passed on, I thought, you know, I have a real gift here with all these stories, and maybe they're not mine to keep. But I didn't know how to tell them, and so I thought maybe they could be part of a fiction book. So in this book, Yellow Dog, a young boy meets an elder, and all the memories of the elder in the fiction book are the stories that I've heard over the years from different people telling me and experiences myself by meeting those people out on their trap lines.
And you've really tapped into two very essential parts of life in the north, both the storytelling and the sled dog tradition. So it's really a wonderful picture to present to people who don't have those experiences of northern Saskatchewan or any northern experiences.
Yeah.
Now, when you were growing up, did you ever think that you would wind up in northern Saskatchewan?
No, I don't think so. I always was drawn to the north, though, for some reason, and I think the solitude and connecting with nature has always been important to me. That's where I would regain my energy. And I think when I came to northern Saskatchewan, I actually was in a dog sled race on Big Stone Lake, and I lost my dog team there, and it was a wind-blown, stormy day. But I had this weird feeling that for the first time I was where I belonged, and I guess, yeah, I've never left since.
Sounds wonderful. And your other book is a collaboration. Would you like to tell us a little bit about this other new book?
Yeah, I think that book came to be. I was working in a local school, and Bernice Johnson-Laxdal is the Cree culture and language teacher there. And one day I walked in her classroom and she was teaching the Cree moons. And I found it really fascinating to see how the Cree people did not follow an abstract calendar like we do, but a calendar that's connected to the seasons. And I found that really beautiful, and I could relate to it in a way, because when we go to the cabin, we don't know if it's Sunday or Tuesday, but you know, we wait for the ice to freeze so we can travel, you know, so I could relate a little bit to that. but not in a way that Bernice did. So we started talking about it. She's my neighbor, so we started going for walks, and she started talking about her experiences of growing up in Isla La Crosse, and eventually we did this book together. Yeah.
And so one of the things that you did for this book is the illustrations, and they are absolutely stunning. Can you tell me a little bit about the process in doing these illustrations?
Let's take my favorite one.
All right.
I think this one is my favorite, as you can imagine. It's Eagle Moon, and well, she would tell me about her. She had 14 siblings. No, sorry, she had 14 children in her family. And when her dad would come back from the trap line, they would always run out on the ice and greet him and try to catch a ride on his toboggan as he was coming back into town. And of course, I could never really imagine what it looked like, but having a dog team myself and traveling to northern communities, when we go out on the ice, the kids always come running as well, and they always ask, can we pet the dog, can we catch a ride? So I could somehow relate to the joy. Joy is part of northern life. So this book is kind of a celebration, I think, of northern traditions in the past and today.
And so there aren't a lot of words in this book, but there are so many stories in the pictures, as well as in the even just listening to that little bit of a story, we have so many stories that we see of northern life in these beautiful drawings. What's next for you? What are you working on now?
I have another novel in my mind, so we spend a lot of time racing between Churchill, Manitoba and Aria at Nunavut. So we met lots of Inuit elders along those races, and they're very much traditional, and their dog culture there is very much alive still. So I'm having another YA novel. This time is a feisty young girl that's causing me lots of trouble. She does lots of unexpected things right now that causes me to do lots of research. But I think that will be the next book, and I have a few other ones in mind. And then I hope to get this done fairly quick, because then I will write my own biography.
Wonderful.
And yeah, so I just need to make time to write. That's the biggest challenge.
I think that's a big challenge for most writers, is finding the time. There are all these wonderful ideas, and you've captured so many of these wonderful ideas and passed on stories in both of these books that are stories that were gifted to you, and what a wonderful way to keep the stories alive. Well, that's all the time we have today, Miriam. It's been a delight to have you on Lit Happens. I'm Danica Lore. You can find past episodes of Lit Happens by going to YouTube and searching for Shaw TV Saskatoon. You can contact me on Facebook, you can look me up on Twitter, or if you'd like to talk about your project, you can contact me at danicalore@gmail.com.
Great.
Thank you.
That was really nice, thank you.